Good afternoon. The subcommittee will come to order. I ask unanimous consent that the chair be authorized to declare a recess at any time. Without objection, so ordered. Today's hearing is an opportunity for the subcommittee to understand the Defense Intelligence Enterprise's posture and capabilities in strategic competition and in synchronizing intelligence efforts to counter the People's Republic of China. The National Defense Strategy focuses the department's efforts on China, and rightfully so, but as we hold this hearing, the Russian-Ukraine conflict has been raging for 428 days. North Korea continues to test nuclear missiles. Iran is actively supporting non-state actors in the Middle East, and threats from terrorist organizations are still persistent across the globe. The Defense Intelligence Enterprise has a challenging task to support the department's efforts in strategic competition, counter China, and support the remaining geographic combatant commanders to counter threats in their areas of operations, as well as the persistent counterterrorism efforts. I am interested in understanding each of your roles in synchronizing these efforts and ensuring your organizations have the capabilities needed, are resourced appropriately, and probably most important, what capabilities gaps exist. I would welcome to today's hearing the following witnesses: Mr. Ronald Moultrie, Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security; General Paul Nakasone, Director of the National Security Agency, Chief of the Central Security Service, and Commander of U.S. Cyber Command; and Lieutenant General Scott Berrier, Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Welcome all. In the interest of time, I will ask the witnesses to keep their opening remarks brief so that we can have more time for the closed session. With that, let me again thank our witnesses for appearing before us today. I now recognize Ranking Member Gallego for any opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the Chairman for convening this hearing and the witnesses for their time and willingness to appear before the subcommittee. Since you testified in front of this subcommittee last year, the global security situation remains dynamic. Russia continues its violent assaults on Ukraine's sovereignty. China, our pacing challenge as defined by the national security and defense strategies, continues its threatening posture toward Taiwan, military assertiveness in the Indo-Pacific region, and global influence campaign. North Korea continues its persistent testing of ballistic missiles. Iran's proxies continue their malign activities, and violent extremist organizations continue seeking to attack the United States and our allies. For the Defense Intelligence Enterprise specifically, we continue to see concerning trends in this strategic competition. Last fall, the NSA, in coordination with the FBI and CISA, released a report highlighting Chinese cyber threats to our critical infrastructure and the security of the defense industrial base. Likewise, just 2 months ago, the DIA issued a report further exposing ties between Russia and Iran over the use of lethal Iranian drones in Ukraine. And we're continuing to monitor the growing relationship between Russia and the PRC, especially as the latter reportedly spends billions of dollars in support of Russian disinformation. These are just a select few instances that reflect the need for increased focus and agility from the Defense Intelligence Enterprise when it comes to strategic competition. I remain committed to working with you to ensure your organizations have the resources and authorities required to address these challenges in an era of great power competition. We cannot do it alone. As I continue to say, our partners and allies play a key role as we work together to counter the aggressive and malign behavior that seeks to erode rules-based international order. I would especially like to thank Secretary Moultrie for reaffirming the value of strategic intelligence partners publicly during his visit last year with the Lithuanian Minister of National Defense. To effectively deal with the challenge of strategic competition, the Defense Intelligence Enterprise must remain agile, be collaborative across all domains and enterprises, quickly provide releasable and actionable intelligence throughout the department, and collaborate with allies and partners. I look forward to hearing from witnesses on these and other issues today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Gallego. We will now hear from our witnesses, then move into the question and answer session. Immediately following one round of questions, we will reconvene for the classified session, which will take place in Rayburn Room 2337. I will now recognize Mr. Moultrie.
Chairman Bergman, Ranking Member Gallego, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, it's a privilege to testify on the posture of defense, intelligence, and security enterprise. With my colleagues, we will address global threats and challenges with a specific focus on the pacing challenge, the People's Republic of China, or the PRC. On behalf of the defense, intelligence, security professionals, and intelligence professionals, I thank each of you for your steadfast support and partnership in keeping our nation safe. I am joined by Generals Nakasone and Berrier, and they will be offering their intelligence-informed perspectives on the PRC challenge. We look forward to your questions on these challenges and how our enterprises are postured to meet them. I have provided the subcommittee with a classified statement for the record that outlines our FY24 military intelligence program budget requests in greater detail. Our #1 priority continues to be the pacing challenge of the PRC. As Secretary Austin has testified previously, we do not believe that conflict with the PRC is either imminent or inevitable. The Department's intelligence and security efforts are focused on deterring the PRC's regional aggression against Taiwan and its neighbors while supporting global adherence to the international rule of law. While we seek peaceful resolutions to issues in the event that conflict becomes inevitable, we will deliver a decisive information and decision advantage to our leaders and combatant commanders. The military intelligence program is postured to support that goal. While I can provide more specifics of the MIT's efforts in closed session, our major lines of effort are focused on establishing policies and processes. 2, secure, resilient, and reliable systems and architectures. 3, strong regional and global partnerships. And lastly, #4, a deep analytic and linguistic bench. I again thank the subcommittee for its leadership and its support, and I will now turn to General Nakasone, followed by General Berrier for their testimonies.
Chairman Bergman, Ranking Member Gallego, distinguished members of the committee, I'm honored to represent the men and women of the National Security Agency, and I'm grateful for your support. Thank you for this opportunity to testify today before and with my Department of Defense Intelligence Enterprise colleagues. The men and women of the National Security Agency are committed to providing vital support to policymakers and to military operators in our vital role as a combat support agency. We deliver cryptologic capabilities to enable the defense intelligence enterprise to deliver accurate and timely intelligence on threats facing the nation to our warfighters and national leadership. The U.S. faces many threats today. China challenges across all elements of national power while coercively seeking to expand its malign influence and control over its neighbors and around the world. Russia remains engaged in global malign influence and its illegal aggression in Ukraine. Iran is a regional menace, routinely conducting cyber and malign influence activities, while North Korea continues to advance its missile and WMD capabilities. Terror groups, criminal cyber actors, and fentanyl-dealing cartels are ongoing threats. Rapid changes in the global technological environment require better approaches to data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. NSA is working with interagency, private sector, and foreign partners to build cybersecurity in defense of the nation, and is playing a critical role in developing insights to counter China. I'd like to emphasize the importance and intelligence derived from Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act to the missions I just mentioned. This authority, which allows NSA to collect intelligence on non-U.S. persons located overseas that use U.S. communications infrastructure, is critical to keeping the nation safe. I look forward to continuing to speak with Congress about 702's importance and the rigorous compliance program that guides our use of it. In my role as the Director of NSA and Commander of U.S. Cyber Command, and pursuant to recent guidance issued by the Department of Defense, I am closely examining access, accountability, and security in our workspace in collaboration with the whole of government efforts related to the protection of classified information. Maintaining the trust and confidence of our nation's leaders and the public remains a top focus. Your support is what allows us to achieve positive national security outcomes for the nation. Thank you again for inviting me today, and I look forward to your questions.
Chairman Bergman, Ranking Member Gallego, and distinguished subcommittee members, thank you for the opportunity to discuss the Defense Intelligence Agency's assessment of the global security environment. I am pleased to join Honorable Moultrie and General Nakasone today to discuss the complex threat landscape and our work to provide timely, insightful, and rigorous intelligence. DIA and the Defense Intelligence Enterprise are transforming our approach to meet threats to our nation posed by strategic competition with China, Russia, and other foreign nations. With your continued support, DIA and the DIA will continue to excel in providing all-source analysis, human and technical collection, open source collection, material exploitation, modeling and simulation, and other unique mission sets. Like you, I am very concerned about the ongoing threats from China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and violent extremist organizations. But China is our pacing challenge and DIA's top priority. Beijing is expanding its global influence and stepping up its multi-domain pressure campaign against Taiwan, as observed by its sharply increased rhetoric and military activity over this past year. Xi Jinping's attainment of a third term as General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party positions Beijing for further progress on military modernization and operational goals that will challenge the U.S. during the next year and beyond. The war in Ukraine is also a priority for DIA. For the Russian military, 2022 was not a good year. The new-look army is gone, and in my view, we are at a particularly dangerous place with Russia. Putin is not seeking an off-ramp, and Moscow has asserted publicly that it remains committed to achieving its objectives in Ukraine through military force. DIA has unique responsibilities, expertise, and missions that you trust us to lead, such as foundational military intelligence, defense human and cover, measurement and signature intelligence, known as MASINT, and JWICS. Your DIA officers provide strategic, operational, and tactical defense intelligence to our warfighters, defense planners, policymakers, and the acquisition community. One final area I would like to highlight during my testimony is the workforce. As you know, our workforce spans the globe with innovative and forward-leaning officers. These talented and dedicated experts are making strides to defend the United States and our allies. From our defense attachés to combatant command J2 teams to analysts and case officers, these professionals are mission-focused and working tireless behind the scenes to defend the nation. I'm proud to represent a dedicated workforce that provides intelligence on foreign actors to prevent and win wars, and to illuminate opportunities to enable the United States to outpace our strategic competitors. I also echo General Nakasone's comment on Section 702 reauthorization. Our all-source analysis depends on it. I look forward to your questions on the global threat environment, and thank you for your continued support and opportunity to testify today.
Thank you. I would remind everyone, especially those giving testimony, we are not in a classified setting here. I know I don't have to tell you that, but I think it's important that we all understand we will go to closed session after this. So I will recognize myself here for 5 minutes to start. And all of my questions here are for all of you, so feel free to whoever feels like you want to chime in. First, what lessons have your organizations taken from the Russian-Ukraine conflict that are helping you shape your efforts to counter China?
Yes, Chairman, I'll start and turn to my colleagues. I think one of the top lessons that we took away in the Defense Department from an intelligence perspective is that we have to have the right sharing policies in place to be able to provide our allies, and in this case, the Ukraine, with the intelligence that it needed to actually defend itself against a formidable, at least seemingly formidable, adversary, if you will. So that was probably lesson number one. Lesson number two was ensuring that we had the right partnerships and establishing those partnerships early on, and not waiting till after a conflict actually broke out to do that. So ensuring that we had the right individuals and the partnerships. And the last one that I'll highlight is just ensuring that we have the right skill sets, ensuring that we have the right analytic expertise, ensuring that we have the right linguistical expertise is something that we took away as something that we have to be prepared for if we are to face the pacing challenge of the PRC.
Chairman, I would add two ideas here. First of all, intelligence and information, and what a strength it is to our nation. If you would have asked me 3 years ago, would you anticipate releasing some of our most sensitive intelligence broadly to the public? I would have said I could never imagine such a day, but yet in the fall of 2021, with the President's decision and the direction of the Director of National Intelligence, we did that. And we did it in a manner that was allowing us to do three things: build a coalition, impact an adversary, and enable a partner. That is a lesson that we have taken to heart. And at the same time, while we've been able to do that, be able to protect our sources and methods. The second piece that I would highlight is the tempo. We go from competition to crisis to conflict in weeks. And the pace in terms of the provision of intelligence is much quicker today than anything I've ever seen before. And I think it will only speed up with our ability to process information, the collection that we're taking in, and obviously the information that we're providing.
Chairman, thank you for that question. I would offer three things from the DIA perspective here: partnership, secure communications, and continuously refining our tradecraft. So on the partnership piece, we all have deep professional and personal partnerships with our counterparts in other nations, and those personal relationships go very, very far when you can pick up a secure line and have a conversation with your partner about something bad that's about to happen. That is key. It's clutch, and it's clutch today. The other piece is secure comms. We had the ability to install a secure communications network that was able to support Ukraine and our partners on this, to be able to disseminate the information that Honorable Moultrie and General Nakasone are talking about. It's so key to have that. And then the last piece is to continuously look at ourselves to refine our tradecraft. We rest everything on sound tradecraft principles, whether that's analyzing foreign military forces or analyzing their will to fight. We have to go through a continuous process to reevaluate that and make sure that we're doing the best that we can. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted, before my time expires here, each of you touch on your ability to get the right people in the right positions, have them, a full up round, if you will. How are you doing as far as being able to recruit and maintain the workforce you need?
Yeah, I'll start, Mr. Chairman. I think we're doing better. There's a lot more work to be done, especially if we are to get the skill sets and the linguistic skills that we need to prepare for any inevitability that we might face with China. And so being able to bring in those linguistic skills, hiring the right expertise, I think is going to be something that we have to continue to focus on.
Chairman, we're in the midst of our largest hiring year ever in our agency's 70-year history. And I would characterize it as being one that, while we will meet, it will be incredibly challenging for us, just because there is so much competition for the best and the brightest today. It's interesting that as we go out and make our pitch, one of the things that certainly that we're able to do quite well is to talk about the benefits of the mission that you work. But I would also say, just in closing on this, that we have to have a new paradigm as we look at the workforce of the future. Not everyone comes into government service for 30-plus years. And so we have to be ready to recruit, train, retain, and then also return people that go away for a period of time, bringing them back to our agency with open arms and readily.
Chairman, thank you for that question. We are attracting a lot of talent, and we're getting a lot of really, really good folks into the agency, and we have to be able to sustain that. DIA is undergoing its only HR modernization effort that we've ever gone through, and the ability to attract that talent, to retain that talent, to make sure that we can professionally develop them, that we have a talent management system that they thrive in, is really, really key. So we've got some work to do. We think we're on the right track, and we do appreciate your support for that.
Thank you, everybody. And Ranking Member Gallego, you're recognized.
Hey, Mr. Chairman. We've all heard the public statements from the Chinese president telling his military to be prepared to invade Taiwan by 2027. There's a fair amount of speculation when it comes to that date or any date. In your assessment, could the PRC launch a successful military invasion of Taiwan? And if they could, what would be the cost to China? When I say, can they make that jump by 2027 or near that time? To be more specific, we can start with General Nakasone.
Ranking Member, as the Secretary has talked about, I certainly believe that any type of conflict with China is not imminent, nor is necessarily inevitable. To your very specific question, while we have heard the statements in terms of what President Xi would like to do by a specific date, I think where we are focused right now is to ensure that there is no miscalculation. Yep. And that's where we have focused a tremendous amount of time to ensure that we clearly understand the capabilities and intents of the People's Republic, and at the same time, we're able to provide early warning and that type of indication to our forces in the Pacific and to our senior policymakers as well.
Thank you. To follow up a question on that, I think Lieutenant General Berrier and General Nakasone, you guys both have created organizations within your respective departments that focus on China. One is the U.S. Cybercom NSA China Outcomes Group, and the other is a DIA China Mission Group. Can both of you discuss what these groups provide to you for in your departments, obviously considering the setting we're in, and do they collaborate? And if you can answer as much as possible now, we can also obviously follow up in greater detail in the classified section.
Ranking member, they absolutely collaborate. In fact, we had the leader of General Nakasone's team into our headquarters just a couple of weeks ago, so there's crosstalk and discussion. The China Mission Group is really focused on China and Taiwan. We felt in this pivot to the Pacific that President Obama directed in 2012 that we needed to focus internally and externally, and the China Mission Group gives us the capability to really stare in deeply and provide the deep insights, analysis, and warning support to INDOPACOM and the department.
Ranking member, they do collaborate, and they collaborate quite closely. As we stood up the China Outcomes Group, it was based on our experiences in 2018 when we brought together the experts of U.S. Cyber Command and the National Security Agency to deal with Russia and election influence. That was the same idea, and with us as we go forward, we're looking at our China Outcomes Group primarily to support U.S. INDOPACOM with the options and the insights that are necessary to understand what China is going to do in the near term.
Thank you. Secretary Moultrie recognized the importance of responsible yet timely intelligence sharing with our partners and allies, something which we saw with our Ukraine engagement with our allies. What updates to policies have you made related to that, and how effectively have they been so far?
Yes, Ranking Member, we've looked at a number of things since we implemented the sharing changes in early 2022. One of the things that I signed out in October of last year was a new policy on no foreign, so no foreign intelligence dissemination. So what we wanted to do is have a comprehensive review of our no foreign policy to ensure that we were not overly using no foreign within the department. There were only two conditions where we really could only use no foreign. And so what we wanted to do was to ensure that our policies actually match what our practices were. And I think that's been a great assistance to our partners and allies. We've heard resoundingly from them to say that they are looking at their no foreign, which is each of our partners have their own eyes-only type intelligence, if you will. So we're leading by example in this space by actually saying we will ensure that we maximize the sharing that we do with you. Even on the most sensitive things that we have, if you would do the same, that will be a force multiplier for the partnerships and relationships. So we're doing that while at the same time looking at how we can maximize the sharing of other types of intelligence with our partners. But we have signed out policies that will actually help us institutionalize this across the Department of Defense.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're back.
Thank you, and I would, again, just remind our members who came in a couple of minutes ago, we are in the unclassified part of this. So, just as a reminder, Mr. Scott, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Nakasone, you mentioned 702. I understand that did we declassify the number on the percentage of the information that is given in the President's daily briefing on national security with regard to how often 702 is used in those briefings?
Congressman, we did. And in fact, that was released just recently. In calendar year 22, 59% of the President's daily briefing articles contained Section 702 information reported by our agency.
And we have obviously have the reauthorization of 702 coming forward. It's extremely important to our national security, and I want to say this: the bureaucrats at the FBI, in some cases, have abused their authority, and there are going to have to be some systems put in place that stop that if it's going to be reauthorized, and there are going to have to be consequences for the people who abuse that authority. And again, I appreciate your agency and the way you have used it. But people have to understand, and the President of the United States needs to understand, there are going to have to be some guardrails for 702 to be reauthorized because of the abuses that have occurred, predominantly with bureaucrats at the FBI. With that said, we depend on the private sector for our economy, our defense industrial base. The corporate sector seems ill-prepared to deal with corporate espionage or cyber attacks, and they happen on a daily basis. And my question is, who's responsible for the security of the national infrastructure, as well as the cybersecurity inside our defense industrial base?
So, Congressman, in terms of our critical infrastructure, as you well know, 16 different sectors of critical infrastructure. The one sector that the Department of Defense is responsible for is the defense industrial base. And what we have done as a department is working through the National Security Agency, Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security, and the DoD Chief Information Officer, look at ways that we can partner more effectively with the defense industrial base. If the majority of the intelligence that we have to share with the defense industrial base needs to be at an unclassified level, why don't we produce that? And we are today. And so we have stood up a cyberspace collaboration center outside of the National Security Agency that regularly is talking with the defense industrial base. Over 300 different defense industrial base companies today that are talking regularly. And I think to the important piece of not only just getting the information from the private sector, but giving. What are we seeing as well? And then having this discussion, what's anomalous that's happening?
Mm-hmm. You alluded to this. The Armed Services Committee had serious discussions back in December, over a year ago, about the declassification of the intel. I want to give our intelligence community tremendous credit for just how precise the intel was with regard to Russia and what they intended to do in Ukraine. And I agree with you 100% that the decision to declassify that information was important to the world. If the world had been surprised by the attack of Russia on the Ukraine, I think that you would probably be in the midst of a global recession right now that somewhat was avoided because people expected what Russia did. The thing we missed was how important the will to fight was. I mean, we thought Ukrainians could hold out for weeks or months, and they have given the Russians a pretty good punch in the nose, and I hope they keep doing it. With regard to declassification going forward, that's an example of how it worked. It obviously doesn't work every time, but what suggestions do you have for us on declassification?
Do you want to start? Okay. So I'd begin with, Congressman, the fact of it's a two-way dialogue, right? The importance of the agency that is looking at the sanitization or the declassification material, working with a series of different senior policymakers and senior military commanders, say this is the art of the possible. This is what we have to do, and this is what we have to protect. That dialogue was very rich in the fall of 2021. The second piece is the work that this committee has done to empower our agencies with the collection that we need gives us tremendous opportunity. At the end of the day, this is really powerful collection combined with really good analysis.
Gentlemen, thank you.
Mr. Jackson of North Carolina, you are recognized.
Thank you. General Nakasone, I want to follow up on something you just said with respect to really powerful collection. Understanding that we're in an unclassified setting, and I think we should probably follow this up when we're in a different setting, but I'd like to hear you speak to the effect that artificial intelligence is going to have on magnifying your capabilities with respect to collection. I assume a ton of bandwidth goes into taking data and turning it into intelligence. And I assume that artificial intelligence is going to become critical with respect to both collection of data and processing data into intelligence. That's my assumption. Am I right about that, or am I wrong about that?
I believe you're correct about that, Congressman. And if I might just state, it's the power of bringing together so much information and rapidly being able to go through it. We're very interested in this. We've been very interested in large language models and this type of data for many, many years at the National Security Agency. I think, however, we also need to understand that it is by no means a panacea to everything that's done. And in fact, if we take a look at some of the examples of artificial intelligence today, not all of it's correct. And so we need to be very, very judicious about understanding the models and understanding both the capabilities and the shortcomings of it.
Is this technology the biggest game changer in your field since you've been in it?
It's the biggest game changer that I can think of that I've seen in terms of as we go forward. I think it's going to have tremendous impacts not only on the intelligence community, but our economy, the way that we conduct our lives. It will be transformational.
Would either of you like to speak to this?
I'll speak to it, Congressman. Thanks for the opportunity. I agree completely with General Nakasone that AI and generative AI is going to be a major game changer for us. I think when you couple it with the potentials of quantum computing, you'll really have a powerful tool that we can use. I think it's also important, as General Nakasone pointed out, to really understand that the outcomes that you will reap out of this will only be as good as the data that's been fed in to the AI model. So data provenance becomes really important to us, as we have seen for a number of years and decades, if you will. You have to ensure that you feed the right data into the model, the large language model. If you don't, you will get an outcome that is not the correct outcome. And we know our adversaries are considering or already thinking about large data models, if you will, and how they may use it against us. Our being able to understand and being able to identify when something is actually an AI-generated outcome is something that's going to be very important to us, too.
Congressman, I would add that this committee expects DIA to be the master sense makers of the operational and strategic environment. To do that, we have to be the best at foundational military intelligence. That is to know about everything there is to know about every military in the world, where they're at, how they're organized, what their order ballot is, what their equipment is, how they're trained, how they fight, when would they fight, why would they fight, how they're led. If you think about the plethora of data that's out there in big data analytics, AI is a game changer for DIA. We're incorporating some of these tools now, and I'd be happy to discuss that in the closed session.
Isn't it, to your point, also a game changer for our adversaries and maybe more of a leveling up for them than a leveling up for us, because it just is such a force magnifier that it makes up for a lot of other infrastructural deficits they have with their forces? It's an acceleration for them.
Yeah, Congressman, that's an excellent point. I think we get back to why we call China the pacing challenge. We need to continue to pace ourselves ahead of them. So they are going to do these things. There's no preventing them from going there. What we have to do is ensure that the respective agencies have the resources that they need, that they have the materials that they need, and that they have the intellectual firepower that they need to actually look at this. Comments on that, Paul?
Congressman, I think the other piece, and this is really to Congressman Moultrie, Secretary Moultrie's point early on, is that it truly is about partnerships. This is being driven, for the most part, very rapidly in the private sector. And so the partnerships that we form with the private sector, understanding what's going on, are critical. Here's the other point. We think much about the ability of what AI is going to do for us in the future. One of the things that we have communicated very clearly to a number of the U.S. companies is the importance of securing the intellectual property that you have invested within this type of capability, because this will be a target of our adversaries.
It just seems like now that the genie's out of the bottle, it's less of an advantage to us than it will be to our adversaries who are so far behind us, that it lets them catch up to us more quickly than it lets us. It is an incremental gain for us, but it may be an exponential gain for our adversaries. It's a potential concern.
I think we can talk more about that in closed session, what we're doing
Fair
now.
enough. I yield back.
Thank you. Mr. Jackson of Texas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it. I'm confused all the time. I just want to say, you know, as a democratic nation, the U.S. values of transparency and openness are obviously pretty important to all of us. The amount of information that can be gathered through a Google search about government policy, military activities and facilities, monetary expenditures, civilian corporate structures, and anything like that is just absolutely staggering, I guess, when you look at it relative to the United States. The PRC, by contrast, has created a system where information is suppressed, obscured, and distorted, and there's also a profound cultural and language barrier that amplifies the intelligence collection challenge that we face. My question, Lieutenant Berrier, is, to the extent that you can share in an open session, how is the Defense Intelligence Enterprise overcoming the challenges of such an inherently closed system? And are we developing new practices and capabilities that will offset some of these difficulties? And furthermore, does this put us at a significant disadvantage that China can so rapidly access so much open source information about us? And to ping off of what Mr. Jackson was just saying as well, I was just thinking as he was speaking that these facts that I stated here, does it give them a distinct advantage when it comes to AI because there's so much open source information that would be available to AI, and we may not have the same amount of data to rely on with our AI?
Congressman, I would say to the latter part of your question, I think because we are a free and open society, we put so much out there, that does give a certain advantage to the Chinese and their ability to go in and do research on us. But they've been doing this for 30 years. I often describe China as really conducting at a nation-state level the largest theft of intellectual property in the history of mankind. So it's not new. They've done it before. They're going to continue to do that. And I think it's really up to us to determine how we defend against that and how active we get in this space to try and apply counterintelligence methods to do that. And we can talk more about that in the closed session. From a DIA perspective, though, we talked a little bit about the stand-up of the China Mission Group, focused solely on multi-spectrum a dimension of all facets of intelligence to be able to bring to bear against this problem. It's my number one priority.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate that. Second question I have is, the intelligence community is comprised of 18 total organizations, 9 of which are part of the Defense Intelligence Enterprise. I know that as the intelligence collection, the means at which we can collect intelligence increases, so does the amount of intelligence that we collect. However, what I'm wondering about is, this is for you, Dr. Moultrie, what are we doing right now regarding potential stovepiping within the intelligence agencies? I think that's haunted, organizations, not just the IC, but law enforcement and everybody else, and it's led to to things that easily could have been prevented, but one agency didn't know what the other agency was doing. What are we doing within the defense intelligence community, to prevent stovepiping and work with the sister agencies?
I think both my colleagues have talked about the relationships that we have, but there's also formal mechanisms that we have that allow us to collaborate. There's integrees that we have in all of our agencies where we have individuals who work from my organization within NSA, from my organization within DIA, from DIA within my organization, in GA, and the same with the National Reconnaissance Office. We all have an integrated system, if you will. What we started recently was the first stand-up of the Defense Intelligence Enterprise Management Council. So one of the things that we decided to do at the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security is actually bring a council together of agency heads where we could get together and actually talk about how we could further share, how we could further collaborate on a number of different things. That session, I think we had it in March. I'm going to say it was early March, if you will. It was actually visited by the Deputy Secretary of Defense. The Secretary was out that day and could not do it. And she talked about the importance of us collaborating and sharing to ensure just what you're talking about, sir, that there is no stovepipes. So I think what we've done is we've taken some of the informal mechanisms that we've had and we formalized them. Of course, the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, has the executive committee that brings all 18 heads together, if you will. We do that once every other month or so, and we have this way of communicating between those integrees that we have that are scattered throughout the various agencies, the relationships that we have, and the formal mechanisms, Congressman, that we have put in place.
Okay, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Thank you all for your time. I yield back.
Yeah. Representative Slotkin, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Bergman. So thanks for being here. A couple of questions and then a comment. I would say also for those of us who are engaging now so frequently with folks who are in the AI commercial space, who are developing new commercial technology, I mean, all of them would say that ChatGPT is one of the most ground-shaking changes or innovations out there. It's the fastest growing system right now, at least if you talk to the folks in Silicon Valley, and they will rattle off a list of military implications of the commercial availability of that AI, right? Putting it at someone's fingertips. They will say automated target recognition, military robotics, intel analysis, and I say this as a former CIA officer, right? Logistics, modeling and simulation, missile guidance, wearable systems, terrain analysis, like on and on and on and on. So I certainly know that you all have been focused on looking at other militaries and what they are incorporating in terms of AI. But who's in charge of looking at what the commercial availability of AI will mean for the U.S. military?
So for the Department of Defense, we have a chief data officer that looks at this and has been looking at AI. We also have our research organization led by Undersecretary Hsu that is looking at AI. Of course, ChatGPT is just one of the programs that is out there. And of course, if you look at discussions that are being held even today out in San Francisco with the RSA Security Conference, I think they have identified generative AI as the #1 thing that we should be looking at, and that's rightfully so. I believe you have a representative out there who's been on the news over the last 2 days or so. So we have the mechanism in place to understand exactly what this might mean in terms of being the game changer we've already discussed in front of this committee. Now we're trying to look at the applications of it. We're trying to ensure that we understand the models, and when we go into closed session, I think we can tell you what we're doing a little bit more to actually understand how our adversaries may be using it, what we're doing to potentially counter that, and how we need to approach this with your support moving forward in the future.
Yeah, I think it's adversaries, but it's also just as we've seen, right? The average American has been the victim of some kind of identity theft, ransomware attack, and it's not necessarily, maybe it's permitted by a nation state, but it's not necessarily directed by a nation state. And so I would just offer that to the average citizen, defending them also means against the commercial use by bad actors, not necessarily by the Department of Defense, but and then who is in charge of the Department of Defense at looking at the rules of the road for the incorporation of AI into the Defense Department? We're struggling with that here for folks who are interested in this topic. Do we legislate? Do we regulate? Do we think about it? Is there a commission? Do we want the flip phone generation regulating AI? I don't know. But I think that sorry, General Bergman, but but rotary dial phone, whatever it is. But who is doing the sort of ethical and moral implications of the AI incorporation into the Department of Defense? Who owns that?
For us, we turn to policy within our organization. They're the ones who really set those frameworks and those guidelines that we live by. They work very closely with our OGC, Office of General Counsel, and then they'll work very closely with the DOJ and others to determine what's the right thing for us to do as an interagency to get after this and how it's used and how it's not used. Of course, we will provide our input as to the benefits of it, and we'll provide our input as to what the adversaries may do against us. But yeah, it really is, it's an interagency effort, ma'am.
Okay. I would offer it might need to be someone's responsibility. It's an issue that's coming to a theater near us. Lastly, can anyone tell me if you've participated in any war game vis-a-vis a China-Taiwan scenario in which the private sector have been cleared in to participate? Captains of industry, folks who are not normally part of the executive branch, but who have major stakes in either transportation in and around China, supply chain issues. Those of us who come from manufacturing homes are, there is a possibility of mutually assured economic destruction if we have war with China. So please tell me if you've actually had the instance with the private sector in the room in a classified setting.
I would just say if we can talk about what we've done in classified settings in a classified session.
I just want to know if you've ever had the private sector folks, I'm talking about like a Jamie Dimon or the head of GM in any war game you've personally ever attended on any China scenario.
Once again, I would say that we work closely with the private sector. And if
so no.
Talk about.
I mean, I just want, it's just a yes or no. I'm not asking if it's classified or unclassified, but have you brought in the private sector to game this out?
Just so you know, sometimes the best answer is a non-answer if you don't want to infer things.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll take that for what it was. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mr. Mills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. And Secretary, I apologize for him referring to you as a congressman. You don't want that sentence. So I want to touch on the AI autonomous systems. You know, one of the things, and I just returned from Fort Bragg, and I won't go into anything that is not going to be covered in our classified section, but I do see a significant importance in the quantum race and where we're at on things. And I noted that China's big concern right now is that they feel confident in their ability to outpace us militarily and economically, but they really struggle with knowing where we are from an innovative perspective, which is really a direction that they're trying to head in. And in seeing that their primary goal, and I've written about this numerous times in the past years, about this great superpower resurgence with China, Russia, Iran, North Korea's geopolitical alignment, they're really tailored towards the idea that it's not so much the kinetic but the non-kinetic element of things with influence campaigns, but also looking at that Belt and Road Initiative, which would pave the way to get that Eurasian expansion, that Africa dominance with controls to resources from the port in Djibouti, which is roughly $562 million investment, the railway supplies that goes into the potash farms and harvest that you see, and also the control of Oceania in an effort to try and cut off Western Hemisphere supply chain. And while that in itself is concerning, we also know that they're attempting to complete that encirclement with the economic coercions in Honduras and Panama to control the Panama Canal for increased tariff and access, while utilizing that Russian, I guess, marriage of convenience, if you will, for the Chavez of Venezuela, Pedro in Colombia, and others within our own hemisphere. Now, we know that it's economic and resource-based. We know innovation is an area that they're most concerned with. And we also know that they don't allow their currency and their economics to be audited, if you will, because they're really far stretched more than what they actually allude to. I look at the quantum space or the quantum race very much like we utilized against Russia in the space wars, in an area that we can outpace them if we continue to invest in it and drain down further resources. Are you in any way along the same lines that the quantum entanglement that we're seeking to try and achieve and the AI autonomous drone capabilities, capacities, which could be utilized to leave our enemies deaf, dumb, and blind, is the right path forward? And do you hear of whether or not China is concerned with our advancement in this?
So, Congressman, I think this speaks directly to the national defense strategy when we talk about building enduring advantage. You know, our agency does really at its core two very, very important things for our nation. We make code and we break code. The making of code is what we're doing right now as we think about quantum-resistant encryption. If this type of computer can be deployed in the future, we will ensure that we have an encryption that can defeat it. And we've already developed a number of the algorithms that underpin that for our national security systems, working very, very closely with NIST, being able to ensure that they understand this as well. But I think your point is very important as you talk about the broader campaign that China has across the world. And this is why I come back to the importance of Section 702 that provides this type of insight in terms of what China is doing in South America, in Central America, in Africa, in terms of being able to have the insights that are so necessary for us to be able to shine a light. Because at the end of the day, malfeasance that the Chinese have undertaken, whether or not that's with, you know, outrageous repayment terms or, you know, the stripping of natural resources from a country, this is the type of information that really sets them back.
Yeah, and again, I think that when I'm looking at things, the evolution of warfare has gone far beyond the ideas of kinetic elements of just bomb to bomb, bullet to bullet, gun to gun. We have to recognize the economic resource and cyber capabilities as being the, you know, future of warfare, which can be done in a room this size as opposed to on a battlefield. And so what concerns me the most is knowing that their ultimate goal is to eliminate the U.S. dollar from the global currency by utilizing economic coercion and other methods with WHO, WEF, with the OPEC to try and undermine the petrodollar, with what they're doing to decouple us from the EU. I really see this as a whole-of-nation approach, not just from our USASOC, JSOC, and the operators on the ground, or even DIA and the EIC, but also from Treasury and the rest of good policy. And just in a quick last 10 seconds, would you agree with that synopsis?
Yeah, I would agree with that, and also say the international community, the Western Alliance community, too.
And, sir?
Wholeheartedly.
Thank you, sir.
And I would say this is why, working with other elements of our broader interagency is so important. The CHIPS Act and being able to work with commerce and being able to provide them the
Semiconductor.
insights, so very, very important.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. With that, I yield back.
Thank you. And unless anybody has any other unclassified questions, this will conclude the open portion of the hearing. We are adjourned. We will reconvene as soon as everyone gets into their seats at Rayburn 2337 for the closed session.